Okay, let's meditate for a few minutes. Close your eyes. Place your hands in your lap. And think thoughts of goodwill. Goodwill is a wish for true happiness. And because true happiness comes from within, your true happiness doesn't have to conflict with anyone else's. So this is an attitude that you can have for all beings without conflict. And remember where true happiness comes from. It comes from doing good things, thinking good things, saying good things. So when you think of people who have been cruel or thoughtless, when you extend goodwill to them, it's not saying, may you be happy doing whatever you're doing. It's basically a wish, may you see the error of your ways and change your ways to be more skillful. And that's an attitude you can have for almost anyone. You may find some people who you find it hard to extend goodwill to. But ask yourself, what would you get from seeing that person suffer? Nothing at all. And very few people, when they suffer, realize that it comes from their own actions. So it'd be better for everyone if people could see from within and have a change of heart from within. So extend goodwill not only to yourself and the people you love, but also the people you don't like. The people who are doing horrible things in the world right now. May they see the error of their ways, have a change of heart. That's goodwill for them. And don't limit your goodwill just to human beings. Think of all beings in all directions. May we all find true happiness in our hearts. Then bring your attention to the breath. Take a couple of good long, deep in and out breaths. Notice where you feel the process of breathing in the body. Because when we speak of breath, it's not so much the air coming in and out through the nose. It's an aspect of the wind property in the body itself, the energy flow. And this exists on many levels in the body. One of the levels is the flow of energy that allows the air to come in, go out through the nose. Notice where you feel that process most clearly. Focus there. And then ask yourself if long breathing is comfortable there. If it is, keep it up. If not, you can change the rhythm and the texture of your breath. Make it faster or slower, heavier or lighter, shorter, more shallow. Or you can try in long and out short, in short or out long. Experiment for a while to see what rhythm feels best for the body right now. If your thoughts wander off, you don't have to follow them. If you find that you are following them, just drop them. Don't try to see where they go. Don't try to tie them up and finish them. Leave their ends dangling. You just come back to the breath. Each time you come back to the breath, reward yourself with a breath that feels especially gratifying. Then, of course, why stop with just one breath? Keep posing that question in the mind, what kind of breathing would feel good now? And see how the body responds. When you have a comfortable breath and can maintain that sense of comfort, the next step is to breathe in and out, aware of the whole body. So think of your awareness spreading to fill the whole body. And think of the breath as a whole body process. As you breathe in, every cell is breathing in. As you breathe out, every cell is breathing out. See if you can maintain that whole body awareness. If you find it difficult to maintain, then go back to the one spot. Otherwise, try to keep your awareness centered but broad throughout the body, like the light of a candle in an otherwise dark room. The flame of the candle is in one spot, but the light fills the entire room. Now I invite you to continue meditating as I give the talk. As we were discussing last night, there's a common misperception about mindfulness, that it means being non-reactive, being non-judging for whatever comes up in the mind. And although the Buddha did teach that you should make your mind like earth, in other words, make it non-reactive when things happen, it doesn't mean not to judge. In fact, we train the mind to be non-reactive so that it can judge clearly what's coming up, whether it's skillful or not skillful. Because we have duties with regard to skillful and unskillful qualities. Skillful qualities should be developed. Unskillful qualities should be abandoned. This falls in line with the Four Noble Truths. The cause of suffering is to be abandoned. The path to the end of suffering is something you develop. You consciously work at giving rise to it, maintaining it, and developing it to its consummation. And the Buddha says many times this is one of the duties of mindfulness. Mindfulness actually is defined by the Buddha to mean a faculty of the memory. It's your ability to keep something in mind. Lessons you've learned either from other people, lessons you've learned from your own practice, that you then apply to what's happening in your mind right now. Mindfulness is developed together with two other qualities, alertness and ardency. Alertness is the ability to see what you're doing and the results of what you're doing. In other words, you focus on the present moment, not just to see whatever happens in the present moment, the sound of the air conditioning, the appearance of the room around us. Alertness means focusing on what you're doing right now, either in thought, word, or deed, and noticing the results. And then ardency is the desire and the effort to do this well. When the Buddha talks about developing the factors for the path, he says three factors work together. There's right view as to what's skillful and what's not. Right mindfulness keeps that in mind, what is skillful and what's not. And then it informs right effort. The effort, when you see that something unskillful has arisen, you try to get rid of it. You try to give rise to things that are skillful, and when they're there, you try to develop them even further. Mindfulness as a governing principle, the Buddha said, is basically to remember if there's something skillful that has not yet arisen in the mind, you try to give rise to it. If it's there, you try to maintain it. So instead of simply watching things arising and passing away, if they're good things, you try to make them arise and make them not pass away. So you're not just a passive observer, you're actually actively participating Because the whole point of the Four Noble Truths is that you are causing your suffering, and you've got to learn how to see what you're doing that's causing the suffering, and stop. So we're not just passive observers seeing things are being inconstant, stressful, not self. We're seeing that there are things that we're doing in terms of craving, clinging, and ignorance that are giving rise to suffering. But if we bring knowledge to what the mind is doing and what we're doing in thought, word, and deed, then we can put an end to suffering. This is reflected in one of the images that the Buddha gave for mindfulness. Was it's like a gatekeeper at a fortress. The fortress is on the frontier. There's a possibility that enemies could come in at any time. And so you need a wise gatekeeper to let in the friends, to recognize the friends, let them in, and to keep the foes out. Recognize when an enemy is coming and trying to get in, and keep them out. I know someone who has been advancing the idea that mindfulness does mean being non-reactive and taking no choice in things. And his interpretation of the gatekeeper was that the gatekeeper simply has to sit there at the gate and watch who comes in, watch who goes out. And somehow this was going to keep the enemy from coming in. I've never seen that work very well. In America is a strange country. They want government services, but they don't want to pay taxes. And one of the things they do, and especially in poor communities, if they don't have enough money to fund policemen, they will put mannequins in a car, dressed like policemen, and park them on the side of the road, in hopes that will keep people from speeding. Well, if you're driving through once, you see the police car parked there, you see what looks like a policeman inside, and you slow down. But then as you get closer, you look inside, and say, well, that's not a person. That's a mannequin. At that point on, you just drive right past. It makes no difference. And so the same thing, I can imagine a gatekeeper just sitting at the gate, watching people coming in, going out. It might deter a few people, but it's not going to deter very many people. The gatekeeper has to play a much more active role in recognizing which qualities are skillful in terms of the factors for awakening, which qualities are unskillful, like the hindrances and the other defilements. And then you have to remember what works in keeping the unskillful members out, and what you can do to encourage the skillful members to come in. Beyond that, this gatekeeper, as the Buddha said, has to be wise and experienced. That means he has to recognize who looks skillful but is not. So you can keep them, that kind of person out as well, because there are a lot of imposters in the mind. And the imposters can, your greed, aversion, delusion, and primarily your laziness can take on the voice of the Dharma and give you all sorts of good Dharma reasons for allowing something unskillful to stay in the mind. One of the teachings you might hear, and sometimes these voices dress up like monks, so watch out. They will say that you have to be content with whatever happens. Therefore, content yourself when skillful qualities are coming in the mind, but also be content with unskillful qualities. Don't try to go beyond what's actually happening right now. Try to be accepting. We hear this again and again and again, that the Buddha teaches acceptance. But he doesn't teach acceptance of all things. But here again, an unskillful quality comes in the mind and says, just accept me, that way you're practicing the Dharma. When the Buddha talks about acceptance, there are very few topics, or very few things that he has you accept. I've been able to find 3 in the canon. One is, if someone has died, you accept the fact that they're dead. You don't go around trying to find medicine to bring them back to life. And you don't hang on to them. You realize, because this person is dead and gone, we have to move on. Secondly, you accept the fact that being born in the human realm, there's going to be harsh and false speech. There are 2 passages where the Buddha recommends how to treat these things, because the things you learn how to accept. Let me finish the list first. You accept the fact that there's harsh speech in the world, untrue speech, people saying things to you with bad intentions. And the third thing you have to accept is the fact that there's going to be pain, physical pain, sometimes very sharp, sometimes very strong. Now, in each of these cases, the Buddha doesn't have you just sit there and accept and passively suffer from these things. In the case of the death of a loved one, he has you reflect on the fact that this happens not only to you, but it happens to everybody. You could ask everybody here in the room, have you ever lost a loved one? And the answer would always be yes, 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 yes. Okay, there's that much suffering just in this room. And when you think about that, that takes some of the me and I around how I'm especially suffering more than anybody else has ever suffered in the world. It makes it a lot lighter. And also, at the same time, gives you the opportunity to develop thoughts of compassion. You realize, okay, this is what loss feels like. Other people have suffered this loss. I should have compassion for them as well. Have some understanding for them as well. So you learn how to convert your grief into compassion. And not just stay with the grief. Secondly, dealing with harsh and untrue words. There's one passage where the Buddha says, okay, this is the nature of human speech. There are true words and there are false words. There are kind words and there are unkind words. There's well-meaning words and words of people who mean you ill. And so if you encounter speech that is false, unkind, ill-meaning, it's nothing out of the ordinary. If you want to live in a world where there's nothing but true, kind, well-meaning speech, useful speech, you're in the wrong world. Find another world. Another contemplation, this one is from Sariputta. Venerable Sariputta says that when someone says something really unkind to you, just tell yourself, an unpleasant sound has made contact at the ear, and leave it there. When the contact ends, that's the end of the sound. Now, how many times have you let an unkind word just stop at the ear? You leave it at the ear, you pull it into the mind, and then use it to stab yourself again and again and again. So who's causing the suffering now? You're causing yourself that own suffering. So keep reminding yourself each time there's a sound of somebody saying something unpleasant comes at the ear, says, okay, this contact is going to end. And when the contact ends, that's going to be the end of the unpleasant sound. Any suffering beyond that is something that I'm inflicting on myself. I don't have to. I'm free to just drop the matter. And that helps you to deal with unpleasant words so that you don't have to suffer from them. Even though you have to accept the fact that they exist, you don't have to suffer from them. As for pain, one of the techniques the Buddha recommends is that you learn how to breathe in and out, giving rise to a sense of fullness and rapture in the body, breathe in and out, giving rise to a sense of pleasure, like I recommended just now. So there may be pain in one part of the body, but you can make other parts of the body not be painful, and you can focus your attention there. As with any place where it's difficult or any situation where it's difficult, focus on the positive side, and focus on your strengths. Don't focus on the things that are weighing you down. Once you've established this foundation, then you can think of the good breath energy and the part that's comfortable spreading through the pain and going out to loosen up any tension or tightness you build up around the pain. And then when you feel really confident, you can start probing the pain and ask yourself questions about how is it the way that I perceive this physical pain is actually bringing it into the mind. Because again, the physical pain could just stay at the level of the body, but here we are bringing it in. What are we doing? What perception do we have to bring it in? One common perception, of course, is that the pain has invaded the body, invaded my space, and it's in the same space where I am. But if you can look carefully at the pain, you realize that your bodily sensations, say there's a pain in your knee, the bodily sensations in the knee are what? Solidity, liquidity, warmth, energy, earth, water, wind, fire. The pain is something else. It's not the same thing. And the sensation that they are the same thing, that's something you've glued together. Can you think of ungluing them? So that the pain is one thing, the body is one thing, your awareness is something else. And this way you can be with the pain and not have to suffer from it. So these are the things the Buddha has you accept, but he doesn't have you accept everything. And particularly if there's something unskillful comes up in the mind, the Buddha says you don't accept it. You do what you can to put an end to it. Now this may require that you watch it for a while to understand it, but once you understand it, you have to do your best to make sure that at the very least it doesn't overcome your mind. It may be there, but you're not going to allow it to overcome your mind. So you don't simply accept the fact that it's there. And then you ask yourself, if it keeps coming back, why am I bringing it back? And again, you start looking inside for the causes. So you don't accept everything. So when something comes into the mind, says you have to accept the fact that you have greed right now, you have to accept the fact that you have anger right now, that's an enemy wearing a monk's robe. You don't let those people in, okay? Something else. There's also the statement here sometimes as well. If you try to get rid of unskillful qualities of the mind, it requires effort. Effort is painful. Learn how to be more at ease, more relaxed. And as you relax, the defilements just kind of go away. Again, this is another defilement dressed up as a monk. An image that's common throughout the forest tradition is that if you have a thorn in your flesh, you have to get it out, even if it hurts to get it out. Because if you leave the thorn in there, it'll start to fester and it'll start to get infected. So there are times when you have to put forth an effort that hurts, an effort that requires that you exert yourself in what may not feel pleasant, in digging out these thoughts. But if you allow them to stay, they're going to get worse. So it's not the case that the path is always going to be an easy, relaxed path. Sometimes we hear that nirvana is the ultimate ease. The path to that ease should also be easeful. That's not the case. So that's another false friend coming to your door, coming to the gate. Another one is the one that says, if you try to get rid of unskillful qualities in the mind, that's craving for non-becoming, which is going to cause you suffering, so you just learn how to accept them. Again, this is a false friend. The Buddha says, okay, there is a desire to get rid of unskillful qualities is part of the path. It's part of right effort. So you use it as a technique. Remember the path, that Buddha's image for the path is like a raft that goes across the river. Nirvana is on the other side of the river. You're on this side where they're suffering. And what are you going to do to get across the river? The river current is too strong to swim by yourself. And if you're going to wait for the Nirvana yacht to come over and pick you up, it's going to be a long wait. So you have to take what you've got on this side, which are the twigs and branches. And you take your aggregates, you take your sense spheres, you take your thoughts, you take all the things that you're clinging to that are making you suffer, but you learn how to make them into a path. And then you take that path across the river, take that raft across the river, get to the other side, that's when you let it go. So the things you have to hold on to in the meantime. Ajahn Chah has a really nice image for this. And you're coming back from a market, you're carrying a coconut. And someone comes and asks you, what are you going to do with the coconut? Why are you carrying the coconut? You say, I'm going to eat it. And they say, are you going to eat the shell? No. Then why are you carrying the shell? And Ajahn Chah says, with what will you answer that person? And his response is interesting. It's a double response. The first part of it is, one, you answer out of desire. You want to give a good answer. There has to be some desire. This means that there is desire on the path. It's part of the path. And then the answer, of course, is if I throw away the shell now, I won't be able to carry the coconut. The time hasn't come yet to throw away the shell. There will come a point where I throw it away. In the meantime, I have to use it. In the same way, there are a lot of things in the path that you have to hold on to. And then you let go when you get to the end. This is especially relevant to the issue of not self. We're often told that if you believe that you are doing the path, that's belief in a self, and that's wrong view, and that's going to keep you from getting it to the end. That's not the case. The Buddha himself would recommend that you use your sense of self as part of your motivation to get on the path. The motivation, in other words, that you are responsible for your actions, and so you will be responsible for having to do the path. And also you're competent to do this. That's the self as a producer. Then there's the self as the consumer, that you will benefit from following the path. As the Buddha said, you develop the path and it will be for your long-term welfare and happiness. And then there's the self as the observer, which watches what the other two selves are doing and deciding, okay, who's acting skillfully enough, and what can we do to be more skillful in our quest for happiness. And a lot of the training in the path is teaching this observer to be a good observer, to use its powers of judgment in a way that's actually helpful for the path. So again, it's not the case that we don't pass judgment. We are passing judgment as to what's skillful and what's not skillful. The Four Noble Truths are basically a value judgment. The path to suffering is not worth following. The path to the end of suffering is worth following. And we have to learn how to make the distinction, see the difference. Same with the three characteristics. You're seeing that something is inconstant, stressful, not self. The question is it worth holding on to? That's what not self means. Basically, that it's not worth holding on to. But before you let go of everything, there are some things you do have to hold on to. Hold on to the fact that you are capable of doing this path and you are going to benefit from it. And when you're running up against a problem and there's nobody to help you, you have to solve the problem. You don't pretend that the problem doesn't exist and it'll go away. You have to solve the problem. Now when you get to the end of the path, that sense of self is not going to be necessary anymore. You use it as a strategy, and then you let it go. The same with not self. The things that arise in the mind, these unskillful qualities that disguise themselves as skillful qualities, you have to realize, okay, these are not anything I really want to identify with. That's what not self means. It's not worth identifying with. And so that you get more and more advanced on the path, you find more and more things that are worth letting go, until finally you get to the very end. That's when you let go of everything. But if you let go too quickly, and here again, this is one of those false friends that comes to the door. There are times when you can say, who did this? Who made this mess in this room? There is no self, there's nobody who made the mess. That's not a skillful use of the teaching. Or when I was in Thailand one time, I was sweeping up around the monastery that I was visiting. And right across from the jetty was this one hut, and the hut was just covered with garbage in front of the hut. And so I asked the monk, why don't you sweep up the garbage? He said, well, every time I sweep it up, people come in and I throw in more garbage. Anicang, inconstancy. And I said, I don't think that's the right use of that teaching. So it is possible to take inconstant, stressful, not self, and misuse that teaching. That can also be used as by the imposters that are coming up, the unskillful qualities in your mind who disguise themselves. So one of the takeaways from this talk is that we're not being taught not to pass judgment. The Buddha is basically teaching us how to pass wise judgment. This self as the observer. What's a wise way of passing judgment on the things coming into the mind? What to develop, what not to develop. And with practice and with experience over the path, this gatekeeper gets wiser and wiser until it's eliminated all the enemies. Okay, then it can rest. So remember, mindfulness does not mean accepting whatever comes up. Mindfulness is a faculty of the memory, remembering what you've learned in the past, either from other people or from your own actions, as to what's skillful, what's not skillful, how to recognize the false friends, the ones who claim to be skillful qualities, who claim to be Dharma, speaking Dharma when they're not, and then learning effective ways of getting around them. So those are my thoughts on the topic. Do we have any questions before the end of the period?
Good morning, Ajahn. Once we establish the concentration level, we have the delicious breath. We can enjoy it, focusing on the good feeling. And then at the same time, like you say, focus on the flame, the comfort of that delicious breath, and then at the same time illuminate and be aware of the whole body,
right,
and sustain that, right?
Right.
That we can try to sustain for the 1 hour formal sitting. But what if we finish that 1 hour practice in our daily activities as a layman? What should we do in our mind actually? Do we always be the guard at the time that we are not sitting officially? And then when we notice it, and then we will try to see the defilement of what is arising. I mean, looking at the raw ingredient at every present moment and do something with it. Is that how we practice?
Okay, there are many things you can do as you go through the day. One of them is that when you get up from your meditation, you say, why should I leave my delicious breath on the meditation cushion? I can take it with me. And as I go through the day, to whatever extent that I can maintain a sense of well-being by the way I breathe, go ahead and do that.
Okay, and sometimes having the habit of always doing something is good in the world. You know, you need to do something.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm trying to do nothing, but it is a habit that I have to change. I haven't really able to convince myself sitting and doing nothing.
Don't sit around and do nothing.
Sorry?
Don't sit around and do nothing. If you're able to do good things, go ahead and do good things. Just know what your strength is. To what extent can you help others, and at what point does it get that you're wearing yourself out? And then that's when you need to stop and look after yourself. Take care of the needs of the mind. So you have to learn your proper balance.
Okay.
But Ajahn Mun didn't sit around and do nothing. He would sweep up every day, do good care of the monastery where he's staying.
It is just the time that you have done everything that is the moment where, sometimes you don't want to have a formal meditation because you have done that. And just like that moment, I need to convince myself to feel the nothingness and letting go, be at ease. I mean to the extent like be at ease with the present moment.
Well, do your duties as you go through the day, but have a sense of ease around them as best you can.
And then maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it's like keeping your mind on a short leash as you go through the day. So when the time comes to sit down and meditate, you're right there. If you let it go on a long leash, you know what happens with a dog on a long leash. It winds the leash around the trees, around the posts, around things. And then you have to unwind it and spend most of the meditation unwinding it. So try to keep it on a short leash as you go through the day.
Yeah. One more question is, because being a layman and having a quite pleasant, uneventful life at the moment, sometimes things happen that trigger your anger. That is where the mindfulness is not fast enough. Is there any way to train the mind to be aware of this and be faster that anger is coming and try to don't react as your normal reaction?
Okay, well, staying with the breath is a good sort of early warning system. Because when the anger comes up, there will be a change in the breath. And that should alert you, okay, something's wrong. I've got to do something about this. And one of the ways that the anger takes over is it takes over your breath, takes over the energy in the body. So if you refuse to let it have the energy in the body, the anger will be weaker.
Ajahn, when the breath gets comfortable, I think it tends to shrink, like it becomes smaller in some ways. So to continue meditating, sometimes I will find myself doubting myself a lot because I'm like, okay, I'm at ease with the breath, but at the same time, it feels like it has shrinked.
Okay, as the breath gets more calm and more subtle, you have to be more proactive in spreading your awareness to fill the whole body. And here's where the concept of the breath energy in the body, it's very similar to qi in the Chinese systems, where it's, okay, there is an energy filling the whole body. It may seem still, but it's still energy. So you stay with that still energy, with the concept, with the perception, okay, this is breath filling the whole body. And as long as you maintain that full body awareness, that helps to keep you awake, and it gives you a sense of, I still have a frame of reference. I'm still on topic. Because there comes a point where the breath actually stops. The breath energy is filling the body so well that you don't feel a need to breathe. And you want to be able to maintain that sense of being centered but fully aware, even in the stillness.
I asked this question when I was in Penang. For the benefit of the audience here, I would like to ask this question again. On the right, on our poster here, it says, let go of the past, let go of the future. let go of the present. Your heart that is free cross over to the other shore, which is beyond suffering. So when we practice meditation, we are actually trying to stay in the present moment. And it's easy for us to see, like letting go of the past, our memories, and also not to look too far into the future, but stay in the present. Now, how do we let go of the present?
Okay, that's what happens on the verge of awakening. Is when you realize, okay, you're in the present moment, your mind is thoroughly concentrated, you're as still as you can get, and then you begin to notice that this too is fabricated. Even the concentration has to be maintained. There has to be a continual effort to keep it going. And there comes a point where that seems like a burden, but then you also realize if I were to go back to any other lower state of mind, that would be even worse. So you can't stay and you can't go. And at that point, if all the factors come together properly, then opening comes up, which is neither here nor there. And it's not the present moment anymore. You're outside of space, outside of time. So, I mean, he's talking about the moment on the verge of awakening. There's a passage in the canon where Deva comes to see the Buddha and asks, how did you get across the river to the further shore? And the Buddha said, I did it by not staying in place, but also not by not pushing. And some people say this is what he's saying is trying to make sure your effort is just right. He's not saying that. There's no effort at that point at all. There's no input at that point at all. Because if you're either here or there, you're still in space and time. And to get out of space and time, you have to be neither here nor there.
Thank you very much, Ajahn, for that talk. My question is on skillfully striving to strike a balance between certain wholesome and unwholesome qualities. This is related to the question of bhava tanha, because since we're discussing about self, so the craving of becoming. But I noticed that in the practice itself, sometimes that there is a tendency to want to curate certain identities, and even the identity of wholesomeness, like a wholesome identity, as a person who practices, who follows the precepts, etc. So would you say that this is a form of bhava tanha as well? And how do we strike a balance between that and also to just take a step back and to practice non-self?
Okay, part of the path is going to be developing a healthy sense of self. Like I said, you cultivate the sense that you are responsible, that you are competent, and that you're going to benefit from this. And so as long as that sense of self is needed in order to let go of unskillful thoughts, go ahead and develop that sense of self. Like if you find yourself tempted to do or say something that is really below you, this is where you hold on to that sense. So here I'm a meditator. How can I be thinking this way? How can I be acting this way? That's when it's useful to hold on to that identity. Now when that identity develops fangs, in other words, I'm a better meditator than this person, I'm more generous than that person, that's when you have to say, no, this is not part of the path. So you have to be very careful about this sense of self, realizing it is a creation, it is a strategy. And you want to use it wisely and learn, as with any tool, when to put it down. But always have it available when you need it.
Thank you, Tan Ajahn, for the Dhamma sharing. Brothers and sisters, let's say sadhu 3 times. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.